it's ready access, otherwise it's just there. All right, I'm gonna wait just another minute to see if Bill shows up, and then we'll start.
Where is the Plaid Wonder?
Who?
The Plaid Wonder.
Oh, Florida, right, Brian?
Yeah, Orlando.
Okay. It's probably a little warmer down
Have a
there.
tie ordinance down there?
He actually tried to find a tie. He did. He said he did.
They don't sell ties down
This
there.
shirt is as dressed up as I've seen anybody all day, so. You get what you get tonight.
Yeah, fair enough.
Next time, though, 3-piece suit.
Don't you dare.
Nothing less.
Don't you dare.
I think we should go with a bow tie next time.
Yeah, Disney World does have Mickey Mouse ties available.
True enough. Actually, we should. He'd be pretty good in ears, wouldn't he?
Yes, he would.
That's it, Brian. You got that? So next time we see you, it's Mickey Mouse ears and a Mickey Mouse bow tie.
I'll go tell my wife to grab a pair right now. I can do this meeting in them if you'd like.
Just remember that people you don't know that you can't see would see you.
Nah, that's all right.
Fair enough.
Works.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending. I'm assuming you're here primarily for the public hearing. That'd be right? Okay, so we're going to start that at 7:30, so we're going to work on some other business before then. Yeah, just as a reminder, when you came in, we would appreciate it if you'd sign in so we know you're here. If you want to make public comments, please sign in, otherwise we don't have a way to officially log your comments. So please make sure you sign in, that way we can make sure any comments you make are part of the official record, and they're preserved accordingly. Thank you very much. Okay, and then just to explain, we have our professional planner, Brian Kesey. He's out of town, so we have him along by Skype. So while he can't see you, periodically you're going to see that smiling face or semi-smiling face. And he will be working with us tonight remotely. All right, so I'm pulling up the agenda. So, gentlemen of the Planning Commission, there's our proposed agenda. What say you? Wait a minute, I didn't do this correctly. Let me, even though everybody's kind of said that, let me do the official. So let me do the call to the public. Is there anybody here that wants to make a comment that's not related to the public hearing? Anything?
Or anything else on the agenda.
Or anything else on the agenda, but public, if it's a public hearing, we'll hear those comments then. If it's anything but the public hearing, questions, comments, anything from anyone? Yes? That is a great question. We asked that question at about 6 o'clock, and as we speak, we're not exactly certain what's going on. So we don't know if the timer failed or if a breaker flipped. But unfortunately, we don't have the right person here to research that. But yeah, that was a little unsettling. So that answers our question about them being off an hour. They certainly haven't come on. So we'll have to make sure that...
The panel's in the front office.
I know. I don't even know if I want to go play with that, because then I don't know if somebody turned it off for some reason and didn't leave a note.
Well, it'll tell you.
Okay, we're all used to it.
Yeah, I just... Okay, so we've got no public comments. Okay, sorry, back to the agenda.
Move approval.
Okay. Okay, flip a coin. Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes. and chime up or chime in, Brian, if you've got anything as we work through this as well.
I need to buy an E for my last name.
Oh, what happened there? Oops. I did
Right, other places.
I did a quick scan and I just didn't pick that up either. I'm sorry about that. Okay, yeah, and that's interesting. You're right. It's right every place else. So we just, somebody forgot to buy the last vowel.
Guess so.
Okay, anything on page 1? Hearing none. Anything on page 2? Hearing none. Anything on page 3? Hearing none. Anything on page 4? Wow. Bonus round. And page 5. All right, you were all set with everything, Brian?
Yep, I didn't see any funny business this time.
Yeah, I think Ross ran out of time and we collectively didn't include anything. Sorry about that. We'll try to do better next time. Okay, so Cam, you have a motion to approve.
Support.
And Dave with a second. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from October 10th as presented, as amended because of the missing E. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Give me just a second here. Wow, back to my sticky fingers here. Different keyboard. All right, yeah, so that will take care of that and that. And let's see here, why don't we just try to track our agenda here for 23 minutes? And, well, let's see here. Which one of these do you think we really ought to hit up first, Brian?
I think solar is probably our highest priority right now, given the interest from the party that we have.
Okay.
Maybe we hit on that first.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, not knowing where else we'll get to.
Motion to
Thank you, Dave.
reorder old business to Solar Farms number 1. Support.
And Kurt, so we have a motion to suspend the order so that we can kind of manage the business here with respect to the new business items. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to talk solar and all right, let's get some size here. Okay, Brian, I've pulled up your memo and I've got us on page 2 and I'm going to move the mic down here and theoretically people will be able to hear you as well.
Okay. So the big change here is we talked about this at a previous meeting. I don't recall if it was the subcommittee or if it was the full planning commission, but the changes aren't substantial in terms of physical implications of the solar panels. Height, location, setbacks, all of that is essentially what you reviewed before. We've been talking quite often or quite regularly about the potential tax implications of solar energy facilities and what they mean for the township, whether or not they're something that's going to add to the financial stability of the township or whether or not they are just a land suck, for lack of a better term, something that sits there that we can't recoup any tax base for them. So one of the changes that I'm making in this memo is some stronger purpose language directly focused on making the applicant prove to us that there is some benefit to the community above and beyond the greater good for alternative energy regulations. So, and I did highlight it on the memo.
Yep, got it.
So you can read what I've got there, but they're just looking for a net positive in terms of impact, whether that's providing some incentives for nearby residents or for township residents as a whole, or if it is, we want to know if they're requesting any tax abatements or whether they are, how they anticipate this use to be assessed. So that might be a third-party assessor that they bring in that says this is how they are assessed statewide. The township's assessor should weigh in for this use as it's being reviewed by the planning commission. So essentially, the changes that have been made are forcing some due diligence on the applicant.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if I go to page 3 of that memo, Mark, item number 7 details some of those things that we're going to request in detail, or I'm suggesting that we request in detail.
Gotcha. Working on feedback periodically.
An Apple Watch?
Mine?
Yeah.
No, Samsung.
I just don't know whether or not that was giving feedback.
No, it shouldn't. Okay. All right, so I got the memo up, and we're at item 7, your financial implications.
Yep, so again, the purpose statement there is to ensure that we're not going to have a negative financial impact to the extent that we can actually make that determination before one of these things goes in, right? Any use that comes in may have a positive or negative. That's kind of unknown, but we can do our best guess on the front end. So we want to know requested local, county, state tax abatements and long-term implications of those abatements. Estimated energy cost reductions to nearby property owners, whether that's on a metered discount or whether that's just an annual reduction. However they want to suggest making it beneficial for township residents. Estimated energy cost reductions to nearby property owners. Straight on to letter C then is estimated assessed value for the property. So data must include local or regional examples, estimates prepared by the township assessor or independent third-party assessors that we find acceptable.
Okay. The other thing for everybody that we've kind of uncovered in one of the legislative updates is there is potentially pending legislation to offer complete tax abatement for solar and wind farms. So while that's obviously a good thing from an energy creation point of view, it's kind of bad potentially from a land use point of view for a local municipality. So we're kind of monitoring that as well, just kind of back to, not that we're opposed, is just what is the financial impact? I mean, you'd like to think that there's a positive aspect or benefit over and above the green energy. And you certainly hope that it doesn't end up with a negative impact where the township loses a bunch of tax revenue and technically you lose money by providing green energy, which would be really unfortunate. So, questions or comments?
The one thing I didn't see on here, Brian, and maybe you can address this, is the fact that there really isn't anything in there that says anything about maintaining security of the area. How and when and are they going to be responsible for any type of security around it, like a fence or so forth? And the other question I had is in regards to the potential for storage for hazardous substances and chemicals on the area.
Yeah, what do you think it might be hazardous chemicals? What do you?
Well, I don't know if there's...
Acid.
Say that again?
Acids and any...
Oh, yeah, okay, if there's battery storage, gotcha. Yeah, yep, fair enough. Okay, yep, good point.
And contain your levels.
High voltage.
Right, yeah, general protections, we kind of talked about that, but you're right, that's not necessarily included here. I'm not sure if it's covered elsewhere, but yeah, it's probably be
You
good
can find the
to.
trespassers in the morning.
Yeah,
It's not in there right now. We can certainly add that. Generally, these ordinances don't, in all the ones that McKenna has written, we don't necessarily address the security implications unless it's, a generator building or a generator enclosure or something like that, we may include security conditions, but we can certainly do that. Are you thinking you would want the entire facility surrounded in security fence, or just accessory type structures, entrance drives that are gated, that sort of thing?
What about just a generic statement about they need to provide some sort of site security or site management plan? So that would include things like fencing, notification of signs, isolation of high voltage. We could kind of walk them through. We could put items down that would say including but not limited to, but that would kind of leave it open-ended depending on where the site is, how big the site is, whether they have on-site battery storage or not, to kind of work through what the necessary security elements are, as well as what their plans would be.
Sure, we can do that, not a problem.
Oh, and by the way, I think I've convinced myself that the DTE facility there in Novi, they're definitely mowing that. I just don't know what they're mowing it with.
They are mowing it. It's not tight by any stretch of the imagination, but it's mowed on a regular basis, you're right.
Yep. Okay. Other questions or comments?
what I have.
Okay, those are good. Those are really good. Site security and hazmat.
Have we done anything, or was there any, didn't we have a discussion about whether it be a study or whatever regarding potential glare aspects?
Yeah, he's got a comment in here, or an area here about glare. I think it's on the previous page.
That's down at the bottom.
Landscaping, yeah, you got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed that.
And he does have kind of something here for hazmat must be placed in a secure container or enclosure when not in use, but I think you still need a hazmat plan, right? The fact that you have it secured doesn't mean it doesn't become unsecured. So, okay. Let's see here. All right. All right, I'll ask one more time. Any other questions, comments, concerns about this? Brian, anything else from you topically?
I guess my only question would be if you feel the need for any stronger language on removal of these systems. Similar to wind energy, solar energy, you might have footings that get left in the ground as these things get removed as the lifespan ends. We might require, so we have, the language right now reads that the operator shall remove the collectors, mounts, all the associated equipment and facilities. If we feel that it's desirable to request that they remove any subsurface structures, we can do that as well. I don't know if that's a large concern for you or not. In some instances, you might request that they remove every subsurface structure, within 5 feet of grade or something along those lines. We can certainly tie that in there if we feel it's necessary.
It would seem to me that maybe that's part of our determination in the preliminary application, trying to look at what the impact to the site is, more along the lines like an impact assessment, and maybe you have to do that as part of the follow-up. But I mean, technically, unless they're going to leak battery acid or do something like that, the only thing you have to worry about is forms or footings, right? I mean, there's nothing there that technically should be hazardous.
No, but that might be the reason that we go back and rewrite this to remove structures within 5 feet of grade or something, in the event, because these are such low impact in terms of chemicals and actual structures, if this land is going to be farmed again, maybe you do want 5 feet below so that, equipment isn't going to till anything up or anything along those lines.
Yeah, sorry, I probably didn't catch exactly where you're headed with that. So what you're really just saying is removal of subsurface stuff like footings or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah, to me that would be reasonable, right? Because you're going to put panel structures in here. I'm not familiar, to be honest, what they're doing with some of these, but I would assume there are 200 or 300 pound concrete footings for these rack systems to
I
try to.
would say very least.
Yeah, so, that would be a hunk of stuff to find on property if it got abandoned. It would seem to me that, yeah, you would want to remove that.
I had a fellow.
Okay, I'll add that in. I think that makes sense, and it's certainly not unreasonable to expect that they remove that.
I have another question.
Yeah.
In reading number 6 in this removal, and if they don't remove it, we're gonna have it removed and basically place a lien on the property for
It
the
should be a
cost of
bonded
that.
thing.
I think it should be like he said, like we do with the mining permits, or like has been done with mining permits in the past, is there should be a reclamation bond of sorts. Because there's a very good chance that these people might be leasing the property, not own it, so
I had a fellow try to lease 35 acres from me.
And even
Already
if
on-
you're gonna end up
on a deal
putting a
like
tax
that.
lien, and the person that needs to pay it is not gonna be responsible
Right.
for it.
Yeah, if they abandon it,
They
they're gone.
cannot supersede the mortgage.
Because if they abandon it, it's no longer financially viable, so they're effectively going to try to exit the business as an LLC, declare bankruptcy.
Yep.
You're done, right?
Then the property owner's stuck with it.
Right.
So I think it should be a bond of sorts to replace the property as it was when they started.
A performance bond,
Yeah,
something of that
right.
nature.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I'm sorry, Dave, you were in and out, but so we want to remove the language about a lien and go strictly to a bond?
Yeah, so that the property owner isn't encumbered with this should the developer of the solar farm just leave.
Yep, so what we're trying to do is maintain financial responsibility with the solar farm operator rather than the property owner, since those two entities may be different.
So, and I would imagine you want that to be transferable, right? If this facility gets sold, we want the bond to be,
Transfer,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
either transferred or a new bond in the name of the,
you got it rebonded.
Yep, so if Company A is going to sell to Company B, then, yeah, it's either got to be transferred or rebonded.
alright, perfect.
I'm not sure legally if you can transfer or if you have to rebond, but,
collecting on bonds is
yeah,
impossible anyhow, but
I know.
unless we're going after the right person now.
Right, exactly, yeah. Question,
No,
comment?
I'm good.
Okay,
Just a legal thing with you cannot supersede a mortgage.
right,
And that's a lien on the property.
Right.
That's a major lien.
right.
And we can't put that on, that was already.
Well, you got to separate out, so if we do a mortgage, it's a lien, right? If we do a bond,
A
okay?
bond is totally different.
That's correct. And actually, you could argue that has a better recovery mechanism associated with it because it's going to be bonded to a use in a company, that's correct. So it's effectively an insurance policy, right? Versus a lien is a call for debt, and you are in order, and there may be no funds to collect the debt from.
And it has
There's
to
seats
be
down in
renewable.
front here if you want to.
It has to be renewed every year.
Spots right there.
Yep, or we can grab a few more chairs. You guys okay? All right, that'd be great. We'll try not to stare you down too much in the front row there. All right. Okay. Anything else?
Proceed.
Okay. Brian, anything else?
Well, that gives me something to go on.
Okay,
Thank you.
that will work. Let's see here, 7 whole minutes. What else do we want to try to tackle?
Pick on Brian's lack of time for a while.
Well, we could do that, but I might bore everybody else. Tell you what, let's burn our last 5 minutes or so. Let's talk about our recreational uses topic. So that would be that memo. All right, because I think we can kind of at least summarize where we think we're headed with this. So I've got your memo up, Brian, so you've done some rewrites here.
I have, some of them are fairly superficial, some of them are more substantive in nature. And so I guess the first one would be a change to the header. We talked about whether these standards should apply to commercial recreation areas and facilities, or if the commercial aspect made any difference in the actual land use. So I've chosen to remove the commercial designation, so these would apply to any public or private recreation area and facility. Is that consistent with our discussion last time?
That's what you're looking for. Yeah, I think we're all on board.
Okay, all right, sounds good. The other standards, 1 through 3, have not changed. Number 4, for landscaping and setbacks, have changed a little bit. So we would require that accessory buildings and structures be located in accordance with all the required setbacks that any main structure should be. And then in the third line there, due to the unique and diverse nature of recreation areas defined herein, the township may modify side and rear setback requirements to accommodate unique circumstances or structure types. So what we're doing is giving the planning commission and giving the township a little bit of leeway when it comes to modification of side and rear yard setbacks. We're still identifying that the front setback along the road is the primary setback that is going to play a factor in how visible these things are from the road, and so that's why I chose to leave that in there as a set standard.
Okay, and your thought process here is more likely than not, we would be increasing setbacks, not reducing them, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And a lot of that will be dependent on the height of what this structure might be. If we've got a 50-foot tall structure, you might consider that the setbacks need to be greater than they absolutely are to begin with.
Okay, sounds good. All right with everyone? Okay.
Okay. Then we talked a bit about the parking standards, which is number 5 there. So how I've got us started off here is that parking standards will be determined on a case-by-case basis for these. Again, as a reminder, this is a special use, so there will be a public hearing called and all of that sort of thing. So we still want to reference all of our standards in section 25.11 for uses that we have defined. So, some of the more common uses that we can find a standard for, whether it's in our ordinance or whether it is in a well-respected transportation book, something from International the Institute of Transportation Engineers is a good reference that we use for missing standards. We would apply that where necessary. Where we cannot find a standard, we would require that we dedicate 320 square feet of land area for the parking per expected vehicle at maximum capacity.
Okay. That makes sense.
So that's a pretty regular standard, right? So it's essentially a 10 by 20 parking spot with enough room to maneuver into a parking aisle.
Sure. Okay.
So those standards would apply to everywhere. Where we need permanent off-street parking, I'm defining permanent as anything 60 or more days within the calendar year would be permanent parking, subject to all of the standards of Article 25 of the ordinance, the parking ordinance. So that would be paved where necessary, gravel where applicable, so on and so forth. For anything less than that 60 days, we would consider them temporary parking areas, and they would be subject to the Article 25 standards as well, but we may waive certain standards such as the parking surface. We would allow parking on turf areas that, where it was a large enough area to accommodate parking still, but an alternative surface that will allow for the uses that we're talking about. We talked about a haunted trail or something like that, or, a Christmas light path, something along those lines where you may mulch an area or just have parking on the turf out in the front yard. Those would be permitted where the use is only operating 60 days or less.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So those are the only changes on this memo, in terms of substantive changes.
Okay.
Setbacks and parking.
Can we suspend the meeting?
We're just about there. We're okay. Questions, comments?
Yeah, Brian, is the focus on this supposed to be temporary or seasonal? Or is this and the idea is it's a permanent recreational use?
Did you catch that?
Yes. I guess the answer there would be for both.
Yes,
I
yes.
think the similar standards apply whether it is 60 days or less or whether it's a year-round thing. We're still talking about buffer. We're still talking about minimizing impact on neighbors. The parking stuff, the standards specific to the two different time frames, I think are important because we don't want something that's going to be 6 months out of the year to just be skirt the regulations in Article 25, but the rest of them.
So is someone getting a permit then to do this?
Special land use.
Special land use, okay. Then what's the period of time, or is there none, on the special land use permit?
So that would depend on what the use is, right? So if it's temporary, as an example, we could extend it for multiple years, but only operating in a 30 or 45-day window, kind of like the maze,
Right.
Type thing. It could be something else like we know the ice thing, which maybe is 3 months, right?
Or the motorcyclotron, which
Yeah.
is 3 days, or?
Yeah, whatever it is, but I mean, the way we're trying to structure this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, is we're trying to really set ourselves up to review this on a case-by-case basis and have the flexibility so that we can respond to each of those cases.
I just wondered if there's any argument that someone would say, well, I just want to use this on a temporary for a couple of days here, so I don't really need a permit for that. And that's really not the idea, at least from my perspective, that you would, if you're going to have a special use, you're going to need a permit.
Yeah, so just briefly, Brian, if we had somebody that wanted to do something for 2 or 3 days, typically that would just be administrative discretion, right?
Yes, yeah, the ordinance has temporary use standards that you'd apply in something like that. But your point is well taken. Maybe we need to define a minimum time period to consider these a special land use. To help Ross out, to help the zoning administrator out, right?
Yeah, I think, Kurt brings up an interesting point is, when is the period of time great enough that you're going for or requiring a special land use permit versus when it's simply an administrative yes or no, as long as you don't create a public nuisance?
Yeah, we're having a carnival out here on Sunday at the church or something like that, as
Right.
opposed to we're having an ice climbing thing that we're going to be using for the next month and a half or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Okay.
I don't remember, maybe Ross can remember off the top of his head. I can try to pull it up here in the ordinance, but we had the temporary use fairly recently. Was there a time limit on that, on the temporary use?
Recall.
Days
Yeah,
or something?
he and I don't recall. We'll
Okay,
have to look and see what that is.
we'll take a peek, yeah.
All right, other questions, comments? Okay, I think we're good on that topic, Brian.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's move along here, and we will suspend our regular meeting and move into the public hearing. So, first of all, welcome everyone. Appreciate you taking the time out from your evenings to be here with us. As you're aware, we've got this evening a public hearing to receive comments on a request for a special land use that involves the creation of a cemetery located in the southwest corner of Denton Hill and Germany Road. The property is currently zoned farming residential. So we're going to talk a little more about that application. I will just say there will be no decision made on that application this evening. We're just working through the public hearing process, so we get comments and feedback, and the application will continue to work through the process as the applicant provides additional information, inclusive of demonstration that they meet and comply with all of the state requirements that are associated with the creation of a cemetery. So what we're going to do first is give you some background on the application and what is actually being requested, and then we'll move into a period here where we'll take public comments. And yes, your comments are important, so we're more than willing to sit here as long as necessary and hear what you have to say. So give us a few minutes to work through, give you some background, and then we'll get to that, the actual public comment portion of the public hearing. So let me work backwards here to the application. So Ross, I've got the updated application here. I'm wondering, Brian, I'm wondering if we should just kind of work off of your review and maybe just give some of the background information here that's a part of this. I got to figure out what the best way to approach this is here. Let's see here. I'm wondering if, let me go to the application for a moment and let me pull up a couple of pictures. I think we've got a layout down here someplace. There we go. So I've got the parcel. Didn't we have the layout in here also? There it is, right there. Okay, so let me do that, and then on this one here. Okay, we're going to talk a little more about this, but again, just to try to get those of you in attendance a little bit acclimated, this is effectively, from a drawing point of view, what's being proposed. So there is a combination entrance or exit that is really a function of a design standard that we have here in the township. There's a traffic flow pattern throughout the site. And then each of these little squares or rectangles, as you blow them up and make them bigger, would be potential headstone or grave sites. Yeah, plus or minus, right. I can't remember if it said that. It says it someplace, quantity-wise. Okay. That is a fair question, so let me think about the best way to approach that.
It's on that
I could go.
parcel plan that I
Pull
showed
up the
you.
Google map, it'll show it on that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to get there easily without making a mess out of all this. You're thinking go up, Dave? Yeah, so that one I can pop this thing down. Whoops. Let's see here. Yeah, that's not really going to acclimate them very well. Okay, so let me do that. Let me go here, here. Hang on a second, Brian. I'm mapping.
No problem.
All right, so
There's more seats down in front here. In fact, there's a whole row of seats right up here if you're looking to sit down.
okay. So again, to kind of get you acclimated, if any of this makes any sense to everybody here, so here's this little circle here is approximately where we all are this evening. This is Center Road, US 23. We're heading east, and here we are to, whoops, Denton Hill Road. Here is Germany, so we're talking about this area right here. Wait a minute. Yeah, I don't have it blown up enough. Here's what I need to do. Let's do this, then I'll get it right. Let's see here. The maps are always fun. Let's see, I am... Why am I lost at the
Come
moment
down
here?
with your picture, Mark.
Yeah, I gotta go. There we go. Got it. Thank you.
So where's the cemetery
This would be this area right here, I believe.
Look at that tree line.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is zoom out just a little bit to try to get a little better context of this. So again, this is the proposed site. And now the map details are bad enough, I'm going to switch back and... Okay, so we were back over here. And... Oh, this map is not going to work good in this scale. Does that help for everybody though? Is that good enough, or do I need to try a different image? Sorry about that, we're just going to lose scale. Everything gets so small as soon as you zoom out and you lose track of where you are. Okay. So let me go back to the review. All right. Brian, do you have a recommendation here, or should I just walk through this?
I mean, we can, I guess let's start at cemetery uses. So I think it's important to note that in the FR district, cemeteries, regardless, they are permitted uses by special land use. So that means it comes through Planning Commission and the board for approval in the public hearing, obviously. So we've got a couple different, we've got cemetery-specific standards, which are in 2205C, and then we have the general special land use standards that are applied to special land uses across the board. So that's what this, that's what the first couple sections of the review are.
Yep. So just to try to clarify that for everybody, so in the township, we've got a couple of zoning districts where cemeteries are permitted. That's farming, residential, and rural estates. So those are the larger minimum area parcels in the township. They're the more rural parcels. This particular site is zoned farming residential. The other piece of this is we have a 10-acre minimum site size for a cemetery, and it has to have a minimum lot width of 330 feet. The proposed site is currently about 82 acres, of which they intend to split off the portion that would be the cemetery to operate that as a separate parcel. And let's see here. The other piece of this here, let me get back to a reasonable map here where we can talk a little more. Too many scales. All right. So one of the interesting aspects of designing something like this, a use, is trying to figure out what the requirements are for access. How much traffic do you need? Deceleration lanes? Are there other traffic concerns associated with that? Whether that be there's a hill in the area, so it's topography, traffic lights, stop signs, things of that nature, or a large amount of additional traffic in close proximity from a subdivision or some other use. So we have some access location requirements, and we also have some internal road design requirements. The internal road design is really the cemetery, but the access locations and some access standards we have work in concert with the requirements of the Livingston County Road Commission, since the roads that this abuts are public roads. They're really under the jurisdiction of Livingston County. So Livingston County is going to perform all of the necessary studies for what they call site distance. That's traffic flow concerns, visibility, things of that nature. Also as well, any requirement for a deceleration lane or other traffic controls that would be associated with the use. Let's see here. Another piece of this that we've recently been working on relative to cemetery standards is trying to address concerns about unauthorized or undesired access. So part of the design concept that the applicant has included here provides for a fence type structure here. What this would allow somebody to do is pull into the cemetery, find out it's closed, be able to exit back out of the cemetery without having to back out, thereby making a potential dangerous traffic situation. But the actual cemetery itself would have some barricade fencing that means somebody would have to intentionally try to trespass on the property, work themselves around the fencing to gain access. So that's just a preventative means to provide some reasonable amount of security so people don't just wander in and out without some sort of minimal traffic control. Let's see here. Brian, you want to talk about the special land use requirements?
Yeah, the general standards.
Yep.
Sure. These standards in general are focused on creating a use or permitting a use that is going to be harmonious with the character of the surrounding adjacent properties and the district in general. And so the first standard is harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives of the master plan. The master plan talks about maintaining rural character, agricultural, residential uses, and a use like this is not something that's detrimental to the remaining to the neighboring properties. Right? It's not going to affect the agricultural character of the district as it exists today. Designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be harmonious in appearance with character. This site utilizes all of the standard setbacks that would apply to any structure in the FR district, so 30 feet on the sides, over 150 in the front, 75 in the rear. So all of the sites, all of the grave sites, there will be no structures, but all those grave sites they respect those required setbacks, so we don't see any issue with the built environment here.
So let me stop you there for just a minute and kind of explain that to everybody. So again, you kind of got to put this all in size perspective, but what we're trying to convey here is that the distance from the road back to where the cemetery proper, the land environment would be, that is significantly set back from the road. So we're 250 some odd feet back. So it is set back further than most of the homes that are in close proximity, which are about 200 feet or thereabouts. So the intent here is, trying to keep it back away from the road. So as you drive by it, it isn't a disturbance. There aren't structures that would be obstructing sight lines, or that it doesn't appear that it's not in character with the surrounding land. So we're looking at a situation here where you're in farming residential, so something that's low profile, that's pushed back away from the road. So as you drive by it, unless you're really looking left or right as you drive by, you may or may not notice anything other than the fact that there's a double cut roadway there and there's a cemetery back there that's under development. Okay, go ahead.
So item number 3 talks about the economic welfare of the community and making sure that the use won't be hazardous to existing or future neighboring uses. We've done some exploring, and there's conflicting evidence, although it's not a thoroughly researched field regarding the economic effects of cemeteries. So some perceive a cemetery as a positive neighbor, understanding that the area will be preserved as green space in perpetuity. The other side of the coin is that others find discomfort in living next to a cemetery or believe that it will decrease property values. There's really little evidence that that is the case. That being said, there's little evidence that it's not the case as well. So we can't say for sure what the economic outcome of the installation of a cemetery might be.
Okay.
Is on that?
Yep, I think we're good there. Let's move to number 5.
me on the number 5.
Yep, that's your, go ahead.
Yep. So adequately served by essential public facilities. So located on Benton Hill Road, there is not going to be an increased need for police and fire protection as a result of the cemetery. As you mentioned before, the road commission is the body who will determine whether or not the levels of traffic are appropriate for this road. Although in our initial review, we don't see any concerns. We've talked in brief about the traffic patterns in a cemetery. You're going to have some regular visitors throughout any given day who might be visiting loved ones. You might have services that come in. They bring, anywhere from 5 to 50 cars potentially, but we're not talking about significant speeding. We're not talking about come and go, constant, all day traffic that's really going to impact the community in general. And then item number 6 is the special land use will not involve uses, activities, material, equipment that will cause negative impacts in terms of smoke and fumes and glare, noise, vibration, all of those sorts of negative physical implications. And we don't see that those are going to be an issue here. You may have somebody out digging a grave when interment is necessary. But above and beyond regular agricultural practices, we're not going to see anything significant there. Questions? Comments?
Planning Commission, any questions or comments? Okay. Let's see, I think your recommendation at the moment is moot. So let me, at this time, ask the applicant if they have any comments or anything they'd like to bring forward.
Just want to mention that it's been quite the process getting this all together, and Tyrone Township incredibly well represented every step of the way by Danielle, which will tell you how long we've been working on the thing. Ross here, Mike Cunningham, incredibly helpful. Everybody very cordial and very concise in what they're doing. So appreciate everybody's time and energy. And it's the first time that this has been done for all of us, so it's been a very good learning experience for everybody too.
Appreciate that.
Good afternoon, or good evening. On behalf of Road Professional Services, we'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity, to our client who has been so patient with this process, and to our zoning administrator who has also been helpful in getting us to this point.
Can you speak up, please?
Yes,
Sorry,
ma'am.
sounds like that mic over there is not working. Or oh, there it is. There it's sort of working.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
All right. To the zoning administrator for Tyrone Township, we definitely appreciate the assistance in getting this project working. On behalf of Road Professional Services, our whole goal is to ensure community stability, but also to maintain the community long-term and its longevity. So we look forward to a productive process in this public meeting this evening as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Let me go to our public hearing agenda here and just kind of get that back up before us here. Did I already have that up there? I think I did, actually. Yep. Okay. So we're working through, we did our public notice, we got the review. So next we're going to work on comments from the public. So just couple things to keep in mind here. So first, again, this is an application for a use that has standards associated with that. What does that mean? Just like an application to build a home, to operate a business, open a restaurant, whatever the case may be in Tyrone Township, people have to comply with requirements of the state of Michigan, the requirements of the local municipality where they're applicable. So this is a cemetery is a permitted use. It is, I will suggest, pretty highly regulated by the state of Michigan. There are a number of public acts that the applicant has to comply with to actually be granted a license from the state of Michigan to operate a cemetery. There's some financial obligations and mechanisms as well to ensure the stability and operation of the cemetery. I'm not going to sit here and suggest to you any of those are perfect and any guarantees. A cemetery is, in reality, it's a business just like any other. So it will either survive or it will fail. So to the public comments portion here, since we got a large number of people here, for those of you that were here at the beginning of the meeting, as I mentioned, your comments are important. We want to hear them. So to work through this process, please state your first and last name, give us your address. The fine gentleman there at the end of the table in the red and black plaid shirt, needs to try to record your comments so we can have them officially on the record, at least if you want them to be considered. Comments are to hear. If you have questions for the applicant or anybody else, I will be happy to direct those. But this really isn't a discussion with the applicant. It's a discussion with the Planning Commission to hear your comments and concerns or your support for the topic that we are discussing this evening. And just again to make sure, because there's a large number of folks here, opinions do vary. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Please respect everybody else's opinion if you agree or do not agree with it. If you've got questions, ask. If we can't answer the questions between us and the applicant, we will follow up with you and get answers where needed. And then just a final suggestion, since we have a large number of folks here, I'm going to bet that a number of you have similar questions, comments, or concerns. If you do, that does not mean we don't want to hear from you, but if you want to, for the record, say, I agree with that person, I agree with the comments that were already made. If you can summarize those comments, that will make the time we spend together a little shorter in case some of you are interested in getting back home tonight before midnight. So just a little time conservation, but again, your comments are important. If you can keep it to under 3 minutes, that's great. If everybody here has a comment, we're going to be here for a couple hours if we hit 3 minutes. So that's just the perspective, but again, we'll stay here until you folks have voiced any questions, comments, or concerns you might have. So that said, let's open the floor to public comments. So who would like to go first? Okay.
I'm Lori Cahoon. I live on Babley Hill, 7433 Maple Road. I'd like to know the total grave sites there. I've heard a couple, I heard 800, I heard 5,000. I'd like to know how many grave sites are actually going to be on this property, and if they have future plans, because they do own 2 Germany Road. They own a large tract of land, as to whether or not eventually they're going to want to expand this thing. And if they're going to be required to put bushes and berms to kind of keep it like you would in anything else.
Okay, so I'm going to confirm here with the applicant here, but on the application right now, it is approximately 3,900 plots, correct? Okay, so there's approximately 3,900 planned. Relative to buffering, we will have buffering requirements. Because this is part of a contiguous parcel, there may not need to be buffering because it's adjacent to their land, but we will require buffering as necessary to make sure, again, it's compatible with adjacent development.
What about the tax revenue? Will there be any tax revenue on that area for the township, the state, and the county?
Now that I'll have to have somebody follow up with you on, because I am not an expert on the assessing of cemetery plots.
Well, I just know that with churches, they don't pay stuff, and I didn't know if that fell into the same situation.
Actually, Kurt, you probably know that answer, don't you?
Well, in most situations, if it is a private cemetery and it's not sponsored by a religious group, it can be subject to tax.
Right. And they did a wetland study as far as how far up the water table comes up in that area. We aren't going to have problems with our wells or anything like that further on down the road.
That is a fair question. Part of the process here is that the state of Michigan requires a full site inspection. The county will also work through their inspections, and the whole property is evaluated as far as it being wetland or regulated wetland, perk, things like that. So concerns relative to groundwater contamination, all of those will be explored by the Livingston County Drain Commission as well as the state of Michigan.
And so as of right now, to your knowledge, there's no other ideas on making this thing larger in the future since they do own so much land?
That's a fair question. Let's ask the applicant. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, so the plan is to develop from the rear to the front,
Okay.
and there's a lot of grave sites there, obviously, so no foreseeable plans to
Well, I
expand
know
it
you
further.
cleared a lot of land along German Road and I watched it, and I was just curious if you were going to expand.
No plans to expand it at all.
Yes, I'm
Great.
done, somebody else can step in.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, go ahead, sir.
Ed Murray, I live on 12271 Germany. The original application, was that submitted? How was it submitted?
Yeah, that is a fair question, and that's actually a challenging thing to answer because interpretation of private versus public is one aspect of it, and then family versus non-family. I'll let you go ahead and answer that question, if you'd be so kind.
Sure, during the original application, I think before we were aware of all the different regulations, had the family cemetery title to it, but in fact, it's a private cemetery. Should have been the application.
My main concern, is I want to make sure that I drove through a lot of and that evidence
What would that show? I mean,
that's going to give you the ground level and the soil. Medium, dig,
okay.
and approximately 6 feet.
You
Dig
speak
a
up,
test
sir.
pit. Okay, sorry. Voice a little fuzzy. So they dig a test pit.
Right.
You run into sand and gravel item right off the bat. If there's groundwater within that. There's a lot of studies that have been performed in the U.S., but I feel that we are considerably longer than ours. Moving groundwater, which certainly. I'm north side of Germany Road, and the water that flows under the culvert comes from my property, and except when we get into like maybe 3 weeks. Also, recommendation, you have private residents. The literature that I've looked up, they recommend to the nearest well used for drinking. So if you break that down for wetlands, all right, break that down for the nearest well, that's 820 feet. Water. So the house is located on. This is a long-term thing. Anyways, anybody that's interested, maybe we should make some copies of some of the issues that the people in Northern Ireland have been facing. Graves being buried for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they got this dialed in. Something that you guys, okay, so you have that. Very important that they perform. Now, hard stuff, I mean, Everything works out okay, I don't have an issue with it. That we need to prove that. Because what we're trying to do here. Water is the most important subject we have on the planet to keep us all contaminated. It'll be contaminated. It's not going to go away. I have a couple more questions. I'm going to sit down and listen to other people talk, okay?
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Carol Roder. I live on 7262 Denton Hill, and he's talking about water contamination. My house and my well are right out by that road. That cemetery where they want to put it is right directly across the street from my home. I don't want it there. I don't care if it's a Muslim cemetery, a Christian cemetery. I don't want a cemetery across from my home.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Who would like to go next? Yes, sir. Give me just a second. Ross, you all caught up? Sure? Okay, go ahead.
Jerry Sanders, 12345 Alcoy Drive.
That's easy.
I agree with what Ed said and what the lady said. One thing I will note, they are even doing research in Portugal as well, and Brazil. Yet contamination of groundwater from as far away as 400 meters from a cemetery. That's with hepatitis A and salmonella enterica, typhoid fever. Also, maybe y'all can tell me this, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally around from these parts.
Sound pretty local to me.
You got it pretty well hid, though.
You want to know how many days out of the year we have temperatures in this area? 77 to 95 degrees.
What is it, 30, no, it's 60, somewhere in the 60 range, 60 days.
That's a temperature for optimum breakdown of corpse. So when you start interring these corpses in winter, it's going to be spring before fall comes. Slow breakdown process. And over time, it's going to build up. Find out these areas, cemeteries are high in coliforms. These are what they look at when water contamination. So like I said, there's a lot of studies. How far is it from the wetland?
Right on them.
Is it 400 meters?
No.
That's a little on that map of wetland. Yeah. That could be a concern.
There's also wetlands on the back of it.
Yeah, is sort of like some people have said, the water system in Flint was regulated by the state. I will leave my comments at that. I'd rather not have my well contaminated, and some of the lakes downstream from that drainage area probably won't those contaminated.
Or the Shiawassee.
Who would pay for the reclamation if we had a problem?
That is a fair question, and that would depend. So, fair enough. All set, Ross? Okay, who's next? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Ellie Adams. Private cemetery.
So the best answer I can give you with that is it doesn't really matter whether it's public or private. That's more an ownership designation than it is a use designation. The state of Michigan has very specific requirements for the operation permitting of a cemetery, and that's really where the majority of the requirements come from.
Do they come out and make sure?
Yeah, they actually have a requirement for site inspections, pretty healthy cost associated with that as well, that has to be deposited for them to come out and do inspections. And again, we're going to have local municipality, Livingston County, do their due diligence as well. So the challenge with some of these types of uses is the local municipality doesn't really have the last say. In many cases, there's things we can't prohibit, right? So what we do is we have to work with the state of Michigan in this case, who has defined what the requirements are to legally operate a cemetery. There are local control aspects of this that we can employ, which is location, buffering, working with our local municipalities to try to assess wetland and other things that the state of Michigan is going to do as well. But a lot of the questions and concerns that most people are going to have relative to hydrology, the wetland aspect of this, things of that nature, that's going to be vetted by the state of Michigan and arguably Livingston County. And those agencies will provide information to the applicant as well as us to result in a recommendation.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes, sir.
If it brings any comfort, the county does require 10-foot borings, right? So we're digging 10 feet down, and they're looking at all the levels of the sand to see what's made out of the dirt, to see what's made out of, and it has to meet real stringent requirements in order to get approval. They're pretty strict about these things. Also done a wetland delineation to make sure that we're not encroaching on any grounds that are, and the engineer may be able to speak.
And are the residents concerned about the state regulations? They monitor cemeteries yearly, and they actually come out and actually review those federal regulations along with county regulations of cemeteries as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Where's the closest well? What's that distance? That would be your own. Yeah. That's on one property. That's on the well. Folks, you have on the property.
I probably wouldn't want to disclose that right now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move along. It's not really relevant at this point. It's his private property, so let's stay focused on the topic at hand, please. Next, Beck.
Okay. Donita Sanders, 12345 Alcorn Drive. And my property is the one closest to them down.
Okay.
All the water flows from the north to the south. My well is the closest to the cemetery. The creek flows right in front of my house, and I'm right beside the east side of my house and across the south side. My well will be the first one contaminated. And my question is, what's going to happen when my well is contaminated? My property values are going to be zip. I'm not going to be able to live there anymore. Everybody on Alcoy Drive is going to be basically wiped out. It really is a problem for me. And then the next thing is, if, say, the cemetery fails. I know cemeteries have failed throughout the county. Who's going to pay for it to maintain it in perpetuity? I already understand that there's a couple of cemeteries that we have. One in this township that the township's having to pay for to have it maintained and mowed. Doesn't make sense to me.
We got 4 of them already.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to, I'm not saying this alleviates anybody's concern or anything else, but I've heard it a couple different times tonight. Surface water flow does not indicate groundwater direction. Just
We're paying
No,
for
it doesn't.
maintenance on all 4.
Bullshit.
Okay.
Where'd you get your degree?
Lawrence Institute of Technology.
Texas A&M University. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yay for
All right.
Texas A&M.
Yep. Yes, ma'am, go ahead, next.
Elaine Schilling, 12330 Alcoy. I've lived in the township for almost 40 years. I've seen a lot of artesian-type water area. There's a man on Mary Oak Drive who went to dig his basement, and water shot right up out of the ground. That water was flowing all over Mary Oak Drive. It was flowing over Holforth Road, all over Mabley Hill. It had to be redirected through a neighboring pond and eventually went into Lake Tyrone. There are several houses that have been built on Alcoy Drive that cannot have basements because of the water table there. This does concern me. Neighbors tried to put a utility pole in Mrs. Sanders' yard to build the house. There were 3 attempts to put the utility pole in because water kept filling up the hole. They eventually found a spot where they could get the pole to at least stand up a little bit. It still tilts to this day because water surrounds that pole.
The water still flows from the telephone pole to the creek.
When they were building Alcoy Road, they hit an artesian and had to move the road over so that they could finish the road. There is an artesian that springs up out of the ground right beside our road. I watched a man put a 12-foot pole down that artesian and stopped. It was a very deep artesian. Still bubbles at the side of Alcoy Road. There's a drainage ditch that runs through our property. It was cleaned out by the DNR, or Soil Conservation, probably back in the 50s, when one of the farmers was trying to farm that piece of Section 35. Water drains from the north and the east. That stream has not been maintained over the years by the DNR, but water still flows through there. It goes year-round. That stream goes through the property owned by the people who are building this cemetery. It also flows through other parcels of land that are ours. There is a large pond on Denton Hill Road that is just south of where this cemetery is. That pond has increased in size probably by 4 times in the last several years, and now water is building up on the north side, on the east side of Denton Hill Road. We are concerned about the wetlands. The township has several cemeteries. We're concerned, is this cemetery going to be monitored also?
Got 4 we're paying
Concerns
for.
also about how the dead will be buried. I know that Michigan state laws have laws, but I don't. And exactly will they be using cement vaults or bodies going to be buried directly into the ground?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your comments. Who's next? Yes, sir.
My name's Herman Ferguson. I live at 12197 Alcoy Drive. Let's just say that everybody in this audience is against this. I've got word that you can't stop it, even if we didn't want it. If you recommend this, this goes to the board, correct?
It goes to the board whether we recommend it for approval or we recommend it be denied.
Okay, if you recommend it be denied, it still goes there, right?
Yeah, it has to, by process.
The purpose of this here tonight is what?
Weeks.
Just to air comments?
Now, so you've got 3 steps in the process here, okay? So the first one is the applicant submits an application, that application is reviewed. As a part of that review process, we have a public hearing that's required because this is what we call a special land use. So it has a little more visibility. We know it has potential impacts and concerns to adjacent neighbors or the township at large. So this is the public hearing portion to gather comments and concerns, and then we need to continue on with the review process of the application. So the application review process is going to involve Livingston County Health Department, Livingston County Drain Commission, the DNR. They've already talked about wetlands being, why am I fumbling on the term? Delineated. Thank you very much. There's a whole bunch of steps in the process that you have to work through here. Those are actually the hard parts, right? Because when they do their soil borings, if the health department or anybody reviewing the soil information decides that the property doesn't meet the right permeability requirements, then they're not going to be able to go forward.
By soil burning.
Yeah, they're actually required to do soil borings.
Digging holes.
Well, they'll be, about that big around, or maybe a little smaller, but they're going to have to take samples throughout the site to establish the permeability and the soil type that is there. How much?
They already done this.
It's a requirement. Whether they've completed the task or not, that has to be done, okay?
Yeah, but it's been done with the backhoe. I worked the land for the last
Okay.
year. I know
All right.
what different spots
Okay.
where the water is
Okay.
flows and doesn't flow there.
Fair enough.
Are you qualified for that?
Yeah.
So all that information is going to be reviewed. So we have all these agencies that are going to provide input that we will review, okay? Over and above that, we have the township regulations, which again involve location, minimum size, buffering for adjacent neighbors, compatibility. So there's that step in the process. The third step in the process then is whatever the Planning Commission arrives at for recommendation, that's going to go forward to the Township Board. Okay? Township Board then is going to take action and make a decision. If the state of Michigan says no, it doesn't matter what the Township Board says. If the Township Board says yes, that still doesn't mean that the process is complete, because the state of Michigan still has to permit the facility. They still have to pass all their inspections. To be quite forward, if the Township Board says yes and there's a public outrage, then you can mobilize and create a referendum and require a vote. Depending upon how, and I'm not going to try to get into all the regulatory details, it's a decision by the Township Board. If it is appealable in court, a referendum could be utilized. But again, you have to put things in the proper context. If the requirements that have been set forth by the state of Michigan, by Livingston County, and by Tyrone Township, if they are reasonable and prudent, and if somebody cannot determine or prove that they are not, then the applicant has every right to the use if they meet all of the requirements, just like anybody else has a right to the use, whatever other use, if they meet the requirements. So we're working through the process here of, there's an application that's been submitted. Public hearing is important because obviously there are a lot of concerns, but this is a long ways from being done or moving forward or being approved. There's an awful lot of work left to do, an awful lot of reviews, an awful lot of information that has to be reviewed before we're going to arrive at a recommendation. Does that somewhat answer your question?
Until I would really like to ask everybody right now to let you know how many people do not want it.
And that's absolutely fair. Yeah.
I'm just saying, how many people, just letting you know, do not want this?
Yeah, and
right now in their gut, they do not want this.
And that's absolutely fair, and that is indeed one of the more interesting challenges that a body like this faces, because very often there are things that people want that cannot be permitted. There are things that people don't want that cannot be denied. I'm not suggesting this is either one of those. This is simply an application for a use that is permitted under certain conditions. We're working through that process. Okay? It's the best I can offer. I mean, obviously there's concerns because typically if everybody's in support, people don't usually show up. So that's unfortunate. Sometimes people do, but again, it's good to have you here, and your concerns are important. So that works, sort of. I mean, it's not a definitive answer, but I mean, okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you. Next.
Yes, Scott Adams, 7422 Denton Hill. I want to know what part of this cemetery is farming or residential? Is it farming, Set up as farming and residential. What part of the cemetery is farming or residential? Who's making the choice to change that? You guys?
It's not a change per se, it's a location, okay? So farming residential is a location in our township, just like single-family residential is, just like commercial is, et cetera. So uses in the township, or permitted uses that we are required to allow by state law, are designated to be located in certain areas. Sometimes those are areas that are deemed to have the lesser impact. Sometimes those are areas that are deemed to have better compatibility.
That's lesser impact?
Cemeteries are, quite honestly, typically lower impact, or
Except for the
they're...
groundwater. Remember, we don't have, we all have wells out here.
Understand.
There's no water where, so once this is contaminated, like they say, we're done.
Understand.
This whole township is done.
Understand.
You know, put it across the street here and see how well when your well water goes at this township building, then see how well like it.
We can all
Understand.
see it too.
Context of this is, again, from a location point of view, and this is not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but a cemetery, for a variety of reasons, is something you typically do not locate next to a subdivision or a bunch of high-density, single-family home developments. So, farming residential is an area in Tyrone Township that typically is rural, it's far away from things, has a lot of separation, therefore it creates potential compatibility.
My home. It's not far away from me.
It's,
Sorry. I'm sorry.
again, you're trying to get a little too specific. It's relative, right? So, again, I'm not here to support this. I'm not here to not support it. And nobody here on this board is here to do that. What we're here to do is to look at a request from an applicant, and they are requesting something that has been deemed to be an appropriate use in that zoning classification. Is this the right location? It may not be. However, this is what the applicant has chosen to move forward with.
You talk about the state being the going to be the one regulating this. The same state that don't care about other things. Flint water, everything else. Who sits over top of the state to make sure they're doing their job? What does the township have to go after the state when the state don't do their job right?
Completely understand, but at the same time, a body like this, a local municipality doesn't have the ability, the jurisdiction. It's not that. It's that you have a limitation, right? We have a limitation on what our authority is. Okay, so we're going to utilize the authority we have to try to make sure we make the best decision that we can. Okay, and that's all we can offer you. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be the right decision, because in everybody's mind it's going to be either the right decision or the wrong decision. Somebody's going to have to choose. We're going to try to arrive at the best decision that we believe that we have, make that recommendation to the township board, they will make the final decision.
But if your recommendation is no, and the state says yes, we got to have it anyways, correct? So basically your decision don't mean anything.
If we say no, and there are grounds for no that are enforceable, okay, then it will be no. If we say yes, it's the same thing. Okay, so we can't permit something that's not allowable, and we can't allow something that's not permitted. I mean, that's the quandary. So we're working through that process. Okay, let me go all the way to the back and work my way forwards here.
Jim Kirchie, 12270 German Road.
Okay.
I have a number of questions. I don't understand the applicant name being different than the property owner name. So I'd like some clarification on that.
Let me answer that one before you go on, just to kind of clarify that as best I can. So, in reality, that means nothing. It doesn't really matter. The applicant is the applicant. Sometimes an applicant is an engineering firm on behalf of an applicant. At the end of the day, the cemetery is going to be an entity, okay? So how they process their application, at the end of the day, it just matters who is going to be financially and legally responsible to the state of Michigan and Tyrone Township relative to the cemetery as it's created, if it's created.
Do we know who that is at this point?
Quite honestly, at the moment, I don't care. Again, because it's an entity.
Well, the other concern that I have is the size of the proposed sites, and I've looked at the sites that are detailed on there, 4 feet wide by So, if this is a family cemetery, that sort of, in my brain, is inconsistent with 4,000 grave sites.
Large family.
The number of people.
Not mine.
Die over a period of 5,000 years to fill that thing out.
So again, back to what we tried to clarify earlier, and the applicant mentioned this, you just kind of have to be careful as far as how you interpret public versus private versus family, okay? You're right, in a family context, if this was for immediate family members only, then we're talking about centuries for it to fill up unless we get a big population boom from a particular family. What you're really talking about here is the difference in wording between whether it's privately held or whether it's publicly held.
So this is going to be a privately held.
That is my understanding of the application as it currently exists. Is that correct? Thank you.
Does that mean that it's an LLC type?
It's going to be an entity. I believe the proposal is an LLC.
Oh, one other question.
It's going to be an entity, and anybody nowadays that creates an entity, it's probably going to be an LLC.
Do you have any sort of feeling for how long this process is going to take to get to the decision point? I mean, are we talking?
Yeah, fair question. Because of all the agencies involved in just working through that process, I think we would expect to have this within 6 months. It certainly isn't going to be next week. I think I would even go so far as to say it's not going to be this year, simply because we're towards the end of November, you're into Christmas and the holidays, you're not going to see action from the board and the Planning Commission much more this year.
Will the residents that like you were talking about the boring and all of that, you know what's going on? Will there be some sort of communication sent out to people who got the original letter?
We can certainly attempt to do that. The other option you have is to keep an eye out with the meeting minutes and the agendas that are published. This being high visibility, I think we can certainly ask the clerk to, consider an information distribution as we get further down, or at least a notification that this is, ready for final review at the Planning Commission. Yep. Yes, sir.
Sorry, can I get the name? Tom Sokolnicki.
You're okay. We'll get close enough.
What was the address? I'm sorry. 7448 Denton Hill. My concern is part of it is the traffic on. That's increased traffic. It's going to control. You can't control the traffic now that's on Denton Hill Road. The speed gone. We've lived there 4 years now, and the speeds have gone tremendously just in that 4 years. Gravel trains are running 70 miles an hour down that road. State police had the nerve to tell us the speed limit is 65 miles an hour on that road, and he's not going to write him a ticket for 5 over. Well, we know it's not 65, but.
Wow.
And I'm
Okay.
redoing my house, so I'm out on the roof.
Is the deputy still here? Because you're talking to somebody different to Livingston County and the state police, but that'd be interesting to communicate back because.
Itself's a joke because I'm outside 8 hours a day working on this house that I've got, and I've seen the deputy go by once in the last 3 weeks. I'm out there 8 hours a day, all day. So they don't do anything, they don't care.
It's a tough job.
And as far as the increased traffic that it's gonna create, that we don't need on that road. The other option would be, what needs to be done about getting that changed to not be a truck route? Get rid of the trucks.
We need to do it.
If you're gonna let them increase traffic on there, then we need to look at getting rid of the truck traffic on that road. Stop that.
Already tried it.
And that's a fair comment. That is way out of our jurisdiction, though. That one, we don't have any control over.
My understanding is you approved, or the board, or whoever, reapproved the opening of the gravel pit on North Denton Hill, and that's where those trucks are running out of.
So, because you said that, and that is a hot topic, let me simply clarify that I can tell you that the current township board, the previous township board, the board before that, the board before that, and at least the board before that, none of them voluntarily conceded to open or keep Fenton Sand and Gravel open. Fenton Sand and Gravel, or the latest entity name, which I'm not going to remember what it is. Thank you. But that facility operates under what is called a consent judgment, which is a decision that was reached in court, a settlement agreement, and is managed and operated by a judge. That is a difficult and emotional topic for an awful lot of folks in the township. I can tell you more people would like to see it finally cease operation and would like to see it continue in operation, but right now, again, it is a permitted use under a consent judgment.
Township's responsible for the sheriff's department, as far as we pay.
If we have concerns about the amount of coverage that we are getting or lack thereof, that is something that you can certainly contact the township board. We'd be happy to convey the information, but that is something that I'm sure they would appreciate feedback on as they review monthly the sheriff reports and, look at coverage and concerns, et cetera, related to the coverage that we all pay for.
I'd encourage everybody in this room that lives on Denton Hill to call and get something done about this.
Yep, very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
I am Gerald Mantell, 12210 Germany Road. Gentleman just spoke about the traffic issue, and I had a different question regarding traffic. You mentioned it earlier, with the county make slow down lanes or left turn lanes or whatever to accommodate this traffic, because you're talking about 4,000 grave sites to start with, I guess. That could be multiple funerals in a day. My wife and I use Denton Hill Road a lot, middle of the day. And, I can just visualize sitting there waiting for all this traffic to make its turn whichever direction they're coming from. It'll block both lanes going north and south. Have some other concerns, but this will do for now.
Okay, that's a valid concern. So again, we kind of mentioned in the beginning here, we've been working with the applicant to establish I'll call it entrance and exit process and a traffic flow pattern to try to, as easily as possible, get people in, maintain a traffic flow, and get people out. The good news is, unless there's a lot of activity at the cemeteries. Cemeteries don't typically have a lot of activity. But cemeteries are cemeteries. They're there for a purpose, whether it's visitation or, unfortunately, to bury the dead. So there's going to be some amount of traffic. In this particular case, as I mentioned earlier, we're dealing with roads that are under the jurisdiction of Livingston County Road Commission. So they will be looking at their current traffic studies, and if they need to amend those traffic studies and put out the sensors, et cetera, to collect more data, they'll be looking at that, as well as evaluating the clear vision or your ability to see up and down the road from the point where you would turn in or turn out. And they'll be looking at the need for acceleration or deceleration lanes as a result of that. So again, not necessarily a perfect solution, but there are agencies that are charged with looking at that and evaluating that and trying to make a decision to address the traffic concerns. Okay, thank you very much. Let me see, if anybody else that hasn't spoken at least once.
Lady right here.
Oh,
I'm
yep,
not big enough.
you're right there.
This is my husband, Gary, Rebecca Crandall,
Okay.
12449 Germany Road. And I don't know if I missed this, but the underwater table and so forth and the water flow, Argentine, what point does the DEP sanction that?
Now, what do you mean by sanctioned?
Investigate, because of what they're saying is
Okay.
going on, and they investigate, they have to put the stamp of approval on and everything.
Right.
In other places in towns, that are other places that you visit in the country, those municipalities also aren't governed. They're not investigated, looked at. So you can always come to a dead end when you're investigating things and everything. But I guess, and at what point this process would get?
So that is going to be when they work through their process of flying to the state. Now, we're also going to be looking at that here from a local municipality point of view, because we're going to be looking at the wetland delineation, we're going to be looking at the results of soil borings, we're going to be looking at opinions from the Livingston County Department of Health, we're also going to be looking at any comments the Drain Commission offers forward. So there's going to be a pretty significant look at the property, water inflows, water outflows, the groundwater contamination concern. That's all going to be looked at and evaluated. Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. What point do you think?
It just works through the process. I mean, it's going to be over the course of the next, several weeks or several months. So we don't have all of the reports from all the agencies yet, so I don't know where they're all at with respect to completion of all the stuff. There's some of the things that the Planning Commission needs to actually request of the applicant yet. So, again, we're just kind of working through the process here with the preliminary review of the application. Let me work around, because both of you have already, let me pick that gentleman right there.
Randy Belville, 13179 Old Oaks Road. A couple questions of the applicants. The township already has 3 township-owned cemeteries, 1 private-owned cemetery. The reason we need another cemetery.
I haven't researched those cemeteries yet. I'm not sure what the, what's in there, right? Essentially, the cemetery is,
And gonna let this one go.
no, it's for more family-oriented people that are part of the community. And so, that's kind of the intention behind it.
We're not part of the community?
Yeah, of course you are. We're all part of the same community.
And the other question, who would be buried there? Would it be open to township residents, or non-residents, or some defined people?
I don't think that's planned.
So I would be fine.
Right now, it's not, they don't know.
Haven't decided.
I'm with regular members.
Not really, that's, we've established that business.
So it's private?
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go right there.
Just a quick question. I'm Julie Inglis, 7333 Denton Hill Road. I just to add to the comment of the concern with the groundwater type thing. According to Michigan law, you can actually bury 2 bodies in 1 grave. So that's 8,000 bodies. However, they bury them. I don't know what their plan is. I'm sure they got to follow law. So, and that's a concern if you've got now 8,000 bodies in that grave site, not 4,000 bodies. But just adds to that factor. of what our concerns are with the groundwater to take an effect of what your thoughts are for your approval or non-approval.
Yeah, very good.
Just really doubling the number, even though you're not doubling the size of the cemetery.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great comment. Appreciate that. We just a second. Russ, y'all caught up here? Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Maybe you already answered this. Are there going to be any buildings in the cemetery?
As it currently stands, there is not a building that is proposed. It would seem reasonable that they may want to have a small building to house maintenance equipment of some sort, but that is going to be further reviewed as part of the application. If there is, it'll be set back, considerably. It'll be back, further away from the road than this point here, so it'll be back, I don't know where. Okay, let's go all the way in the back again.
Mark?
Hang on just a second. Brian, go ahead.
Can I hop in 1 second? It might be a good opportunity now to talk about if we assume that a plan is going to be approved in some form or fashion. It might not be how it exists today, but it should be worth noting that as a special land use, any changes that would be made above and beyond the plan that gets approved, in the future, if a building were to be proposed, that would have to come back to the township, and it would go through the public hearing process again as an amendment to the special land use. So, whatever gets approved by the township, assuming it would get approved, will come back for further review. Just a thought and for information for the public.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So again, just to try to expand upon that. So this is a preliminary plan, right? It's not approved yet, it's a preliminary plan. Whatever that final plan is, with this being a special land use, that is the plan, that's all that it's permitted. If the applicant wants to make any changes to that, whether it's to increase the number of burial sites, reduce the number of burial sites, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense as far as saying I want to change the pattern, but adding a building, any changes to the site is going to have to be reviewed again under the special land use requirements and reevaluated, okay? So typically when that happens, you're looking at expansions. In cases like this, you can be thinking more of additions. So again, if they don't end up with a maintenance building of any sort, or a ceremonial building, or whatever it might be, a structure of any kind, if they don't have one, if they want to add one, they'll have to come back through the special land use process to amend the plan, okay? So it'll get reviewed all over again. Okay, does that help? Okay? Yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding from what I've read about Muslim burial practices that a burial must be performed within 24 hours of death. Will a death certificate be filed with the township body, county, when a death happens and there's going to be a burial? And another thing, because it's going to be 24/7, are we going to have burials at all time of the night? What is this going to do for our noise pollution in the area? Is there going to be backhoe equipment digging the graves? I mean, I can't imagine you out there with a shovel in December trying to bury Uncle Joe. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Let me answer the last question. As part of special land use approval, we will establish hours of operation. So that has yet to be, further discussed, but it won't be 24/7.
My understanding, 24 hours is what they... So. I don't want to get into the different burials and different religions and different practices, but from a general procedural point of view, a cemetery is a cemetery. It is part of a
an approval process the township's going to have. Regardless of who dies when and what the burial requirements are, we're going to establish hours of operation. So if it's within those hours of operation, then if the facility is approved, then they can work through the process of ceremony and burial. If it's outside of those hours, they would be in violation of the terms and conditions of the special land use, and it could be revoked. Okay? Okay. Yes, sir.
Richard Schumacher, 7385 Patton Road. I submitted a letter that most of the I guess one thing I want to point out to the planning commission, they're concerned about whether the state's inspecting or the DNR. The planning commission can require in the special use permit that all of these documents be submitted to the township by the owner. So a yearly inspection by the state should come to the township so that people look at them. All of the things like the wetlands, the ownership of it, the fact that the current land is owned by someone absent from the township. It says Los Altos, California. It seems like there's a higher probability of problems. And the maintenance, the road access, all of that has to be established in accordance with the township, plus proven by the applicant, so that it does have a record that we can track down. So make sure it goes in the special use permit.
Yep, thank you very much for that, Mr. Schumacher. Yeah, it's another good point here in the processes and procedures that typically occur with special land uses, and that is whether uses are approved in perpetuity or whether they have annual or semi-annual or other renewal requirements or other documentation. So I'm not sure we've completely established what those requirements are yet for, or going to be for this particular use, but it would be typical for something that is licensed by the state of Michigan and has inspection requirements that documentation be proven to be current at some periodic, some period of time. So again, that'll be further discussed. It's a great point, great comment. Thank you very much. Anything you wanted to add about that, Brian?
No, I think you've got it covered.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who wants to be next? Okay, let's go back that way. I see a finger pointing. Okay.
I've always found the Sufis to be good neighbors. Concerns about the wetlands. I would like to know burial practices. Are they buried? There are no wrapped in a cloth. How are they buried?
The 24-hour thing is not, you have to meet the state law requirements, no matter what those are, as well as the township requirements. So nothing supersedes that. So typically you do try to bury the dead as soon as possible. It's traditionally, with most fall into that same practice. And bodies are wrapped in a shroud, in a white shroud. And then oh yeah. Yes.
No coffin. Put in a vault.
Okay, where would, you're talking thousands of people, where are they all gonna come from?
Yeah, let me help you avoid answering that question. That unfortunately is just not relevant. I mean, the reality is, if this is like any other business, you can create a restaurant with 50 seats, you can create a restaurant with 10,000 seats. That doesn't mean you'll have any customers, right? So this is very similar. They've applied for a cemetery with X number of potential plots. That's the size. Whether they will all get used and whether they will get used in our lifetimes, our kids' lifetimes, or their lifetimes is to be determined.
Okay, did you say that start at the west end?
They said they were going to work from the back towards the front.
Okay, that's contrary. It sounds like we've got
phase one, phase two, phase. We done all in one phase.
Yeah, but phase one is on the east.
Yeah, I think the document we have shows phase one now being up front versus in back, so I'm assuming you've maybe got an updated. Yeah, got it.
Are there going to be grave markers out on the ground or?
Not pretty crazy as far as monuments go. Usually it's pretty typical cemetery grave markers, either on the ground or a foot or two off the ground.
Okay. And over what period of time do you expect the whole thing?
We got a lot of work to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Gary Crandall, and on Germany Road, right across the street from the property. Is it true that the Sufi is sovereign territory? I've heard that from the local police. It's sovereign territory. The police, local police cannot just walk onto the property.
There's nothing special about the property.
Immunity. They have
Okay.
immunity.
Okay.
I think that would be bad information.
Okay.
It's,
We were told that.
yeah, there's, and I haven't heard all of them, but I got informed of a couple of interesting rumors, and, I guess just to kind of reassure everybody, it's a parcel of land, it's in Tyrone Township, it's like everybody else's parcel of land, other than the fact that it's theirs, not yours. It has certain characteristics that are different than yours, which are theirs, and it just goes from there. So there's nothing unique or special that I'm aware of, and as you've stated, there's nothing that you're aware of. So, okay.
I'm sorry, but will there be a street light out there since our driveway will be directly across from the entrance into the cemetery?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. To be honest, we haven't fully explored that yet. I think that's going to be an interesting part of the discussion just relative to security and traffic flow. So that's something it's a great question, but I don't think we've got an answer for that yet. That definitely would be a no. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Gerald Mantell again. Do we have ironclad assurance that there will be no more than 4,000 sites, or will it be multiples of that? There's a lot of land there.
Yeah, so that's a question that was asked before, and the only assurance I can give you at the moment is this is what the applicant has brought forward, and if it's approved, it's going to be approved in some configuration similar to this. It's going to have a limitation on the number of sites. It'll have a particular size, so it can't change unless it comes back for an expansion and a reapproval. Okay, so whatever it is, it's going to be that for a significant period of time. And again, unless somebody here knows something that I don't, even if this is open to everybody in Tyrone Township, I don't know how you fill that up very fast unless we have a local catastrophe or disaster. So it's going to take time for this to develop. And again, again, unless somebody knows something I don't know, I would be willing to make a prediction that I just don't see this expanding in 30, 40, 50 years. You never know, but yeah, so, yes, sir.
That can't be, if they have, my understanding, they own 160 acres there. This is an 80-acre parcel on the corner. How many actual acres is the cemetery? Or did you say?
The cemetery is 10.
Only 10?
10.
And why can't that thing be put way back off the road? I drove by there today and paid attention. And that goes up
Wet
the
back
hill,
there.
so that's gonna stick out to the road. You can put all the berm you want
Yep,
in
yep.
front, but it's gonna stick out and you're gonna see it driving by.
Sure.
There's no reason that can't be moved.
Well, there's
The reason
So it-
is the Germany Road is a main road.
Arterial road.
Arterial road, and it's got to be It's gotta be on an arterial road, Stan.
Yeah, what he said was, one of the requirements that we have for cemeteries is they have to be on an arterial road, a main road. So right now, it needs to abut Germany Road as a major arterial road. As far as pushing it further back,
I know
okay,
that the Veteran Cemetery is on an arterial road. That's not a main road.
Denton Hill Road.
The one in Hill, and up in Holly. that's-
Yep, so again, separate out what our local requirements are versus what somebody else has or may have developed many, many years ago.
They can still put their driveway there.
Yep,
It's just gonna be a very long driveway in there.
Understand. So the easiest answer that I can give you at the moment, as far as why it's where it is because that's what the applicant has requested. Okay? So could it be moved? Maybe. In the course of evaluating soils and other conditions, may it be a better option to move it or locate it or change the dimensions or something? Maybe. At the moment, this is what they've applied for. They're working through the process for this particular location.
The fact that that property does rise should be taken into consideration.
Gotcha.
It's not just flat.
Yep.
You're gonna see it.
Yep. Okay.
I just have one
Yep, go
question
ahead.
for the gentleman. Since this is for your Muslim community, which is just down the street from us, will other Muslim communities be able to use this cemetery as well?
We've not said that this is for a Muslim community.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, not a problem. Okay, anybody else? I'll give you another shot. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Ed Murray again. Information and a couple questions. I did talk to the Tyrone Township. Historical High Cemetery. That cemetery goes back around 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
Township. And that includes along the road.
So the state requires you to have $50,000 in the bank at all times.
That'll cover 1 year.
As far as the state or whoever is going to be doing around the world, they dig an actual for analysis.
Last time we were out there was about 3 feet down. And we're gonna go a little deeper now, 10 feet down and 6 feet, or 3 feet down.
What's the,
Most graves are 6 feet deep.
Guy's head's gonna be sticking out then.
For the boring.
right, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yes, sir.
How many boreholes and where are they gonna be located about the site?
That's the county. The county's gonna come out and be on site, and they'll determine where and how many to drill. I don't think it's in the regulation.
Yeah, so eventually what will happen is there'll end up being a drawing that is a part of their package that will actually have information and locations for all of the borings that are there, and there'll be a report from the county, relative to their analysis on the borings. So at some point, that'll become available as part of the record. Okay, final call.
Linda Koenig, I live at 12231 Fairview Road. I have submitted to the board my concerns about about protecting the township. But I do have a question for this gentleman. So, you did not.
Oh, my fault. Hassan. Hassan is my fish name. Siddiqui. No,
No.
Siddiqui.
Okay. What do you expect to be the annual burial rate? I mean, you must, you must try to figure
Pretty
it out.
minimal.
Pardon?
I mean, it's pretty minimal, the amount of people that we know that pass away on an annual basis. I knew one person of last year.
So you've got almost 4,000 sites and you're thinking 5 a year? Is that what you're thinking?
You can't.
I know, but when you're planning your business, you must have to at least try to figure out.
Okay, I don't know if we want to have, well, we can, let's actually do that with the applicant.
That's a fair question. Maybe I can address the township.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
that'd be perfect.
So, one, it's wonderful to see everybody come out here and support Tyrone Township. I love Tyrone Township. I've been a resident here for a while now. My folks, almost 30 years in Fenton. My 2 boys were born in my farmhouse over on Heartland Road. So, very fond of Tyrone Township and definitely take into account all these concerns. And I appreciate you guys voicing them to us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to resubmit this drawing here. And it's going to show a greatly reduced number of plots because we kind of put up the max that we wanted to put just as a business plan idea, right? The intention is not to fill 4,000 graves or 8,000 graves if we're going to double it up, right? The intention is to have a cemetery for our families and people that we know in the community that we love, that we want to be buried next to each other, right? It's a very, that's the only reason we're doing this, right? We're not doing this to fill up 4,000 graves and then extend it for another 4,000 until the whole thing's a cemetery. All we want to do is have a place where our family, our loved ones, our friends, their families can rest in peace next to each other. That's our only intention. So if you think about your community and everybody you know and everybody that you love and everybody they know and they love, it doesn't take up that much room and it's not that many plots, right? In our circle of friends, we've had 5 deaths in the last 4 years. And that would be the extent of who we're going to be burying, right? It's not going to extend out too far because we do love Tyrone. It's certainly open to any resident of Tyrone, right? There's no objection to that. It's not a Muslim cemetery. It's just a cemetery, right? So, and on another note, just on a personal level, hopefully you guys can separate the personal from what we're attempting to do here because I am a community member here and so is my family and I don't want this to somehow have you guys not like me or are angry at me because I'm presenting this to the township. Okay, we're all kind of one community here and I want to make sure that that this doesn't somehow anger you to the point where you're personally offended by myself or my wife or my kids or any of us. So that's all I want to say.
No, ma'am. It has nothing to do with you being a Muslim. It has everything to do with our wetlands, our ground, being right across from my home. It has nothing to do with your religion. You've been down there for a long, long time. We've been here 40 years. That has nothing to do with it.
And again, you know, our goal is not to fill this thing with 4,000 bodies so it's going to, you know, decay into the earth and affect the wetlands. That would put us at risk more than you because we live on the property. So the last thing we would want to do is affect our own property value, affect our own ability to drink the water that flows through our wells for our kids and families. That's certainly always the number one priority is safety, 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 safety. Our intention is to...
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go final call. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm Robert Johnston from 12150 Germany Road. I've seen I know one particular grave I saw many years ago, a private family. The family has been gone forever. And that grave site is a mess. Trees growing through it, vermin digging underneath it. If this family should decide to sell all of this, who then is responsible for all of this? That's basically my question.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm not sure I have a great answer for you on that. You know, it would typically change hands, but one of the reasons that there's, I'm going to call it an endowment fund, but a requirement from the state to provide a fund and then a basis to try to finance these on a per, I'm going to call it it is going to sound terrible, but on a per death basis. There's a requirement that a minimum amount of funds, I believe it's not less than $20, be contributed into the account. It is fair to be concerned about at least historical cemeteries and how they have evolved from ownership changes over the years and become, you know, really owned and operated by municipalities. That just is what it is from history and a number of other things. It is absolutely fair to consider that moving forward. You know, the state of Michigan has some requirements to try to address that. Those are questions that we want to understand, you know, fully from a township level, because as several of you pointed out, if for whatever reason the cemetery, let me just use the term, runs out of money, doesn't matter why, doesn't matter if they move away, doesn't matter, it runs out of money. So what happens to it? Does it really become now the obligation of Tyrone Township to maintain? Who's going to pay the bill, et cetera? Those are all fair questions. I don't think we have all those answers at the moment. We would agree those are valid questions. Okay?
Oh, can I have a follow-up also?
Absolutely.
I don't understand the need for a private or a family cemetery when there's already so many public ones right in the area.
And I would simply, on behalf of the applicant, say that's fair, but they have a right to have and apply for a cemetery if they meet the requirements that are set forth by the state of Michigan and the local municipality. So, again, I liken that to, my best example is a simple restaurant. You know, you can pick a restaurant and cook and try to sell anything you want, and it doesn't mean anybody else wants to eat it. So it's a bad comparison relative to the topic at hand, but it's the best example of a business that is challenging for anybody.
But again, a cemetery, bodies in the ground.
Understand.
You can just demolish it and put something else there. It's very easy.
It seems easier. Again, we understand the concerns that have been voiced, so I think we're all on the same page with that. Okay. All right. I don't think you've had a chance to speak yet, so go ahead, sir.
Just Steve Gornick, 13170 Old Oaks. As far as the fencing and the hours of operation, I know the other cemeteries, there's one south of us, there's hours posted, and I think the sheriff opens and closes the gate.
I'm not sure who does, actually, to be honest with you.
I think it's locked. I'm just wondering, I mean, if that will be controlled. I mean, if it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., it'll be open and closed at those hours.
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and that's a piece of the puzzle that we have to work through with the applicant as far as, you know, what their operating environment or scheme or schedule is going to be yet. So, and typically what we do with all that is whatever those operational terms and conditions, those are put on the site plan. So at some point, if somebody ever wants to know what was approved, you pull up the site plan, the drawing, and it's going to have wording there, hours of operation, condition, all the things that would be part of the operation. So, but it's something we have to.
If it goes outside of those hours, who does that get reported to?
Yeah, so the beauty of having regulations and having documentation is that you can establish what everybody agreed to. The challenge is when it's not adhered to, then what do you do? So, you know, the first thing is somebody's got to report it, and then the second thing is somebody has to agree to take action. So it always depends on, you know, what the situation is. It's a bad answer. That's saying a bunch of something with no real answer to you, but you know the reality is that unless you have some sort of requirements to work from, you have nothing to enforce. So, okay. This is last call. I'm going to give you final shot.
Since this is going to be a business, because it's an LLC, so it is a business.
Right.
Is there a reason it's not being rezoned to commercial?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So,
There are other commercial properties.
yeah, so that's a very interesting and fair question. So, you typically don't, and you do not want to rezone a small piece of property in the middle of another zoning district. It's something called spot zoning when you do that. So you want to have an area that is set aside, that is zoned and transitions to other semi-compatible zoning districts. So you work from low density to medium density to high density to commercial typically, all right? So this is a use that has been decided it should be in a low density area, farming residential, so it is a use that's permitted in that location as a special land use. We wouldn't rezone it to commercial, even though it's operated as an LLC, that's an ownership and an operation mechanism. You won't rezone it just because it's not compatible with commercial. And if you rezoned it to commercial, the bigger issue is now anything that's permitted in whatever that commercial district is that you rezoned it to would be permitted on that property. So now you got to really think through those ramifications, because now if it's commercial, what's the next use that you don't want there, right? You can put all kinds of things on 10 acres you probably don't want.
Can I get your name again? Tom Sullivan.
All right, Richard, I'm going to give you, then this is going to be final call here, so.
I didn't know that. I've had other final calls. Anyhow, you know, when the state and everybody else does their inspections and puts forth that, what guarantee are we going to have that the state's going to perform the way they said they would? You know, that water is still going to flow, and if it's contaminated, then the state's going to have to do something. There's no guarantee they will.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think is you know better than most. That is the challenge with all of this stuff. There are no guarantees in life, and so I guess the positive thing is we've learned a lot of valuable lessons over the years. We arguably have a better vetting process to try to understand some of these things, but we certainly can't prevent everything. All we can do is the best we can with the information we can gather. We know we need more information now than we used to in the past. As has been pointed out by the gentleman sitting next to you, a lot of people have learned some interesting lessons and valuable lessons over the years about what a cemetery is and what it does. No different than landfills and gravel pits and other uses. And so, with that knowledge comes hopefully an ability to make an informed decision. So, thank you. Okay, you're welcome to stay if you want to. We're only going to talk for a few more minutes, but that's the public comments section of our public hearing. And then from a planning commission point of view here, folks, any final comments from the planning commission?
Apparently it's not a very popular subject.
Brian, any comments from you?
No, I think, there was a lot of good input, a couple things addressed that we need to take into account, and we can get into them when we have a bit more information.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so that's all right.
The planning commission comments?
Yeah, that's it. We still got an application to work through, so we don't have time to review the full application. We don't have all the agency reviews yet or anything. So
We're gonna have comments, and I was
yeah, and nobody has any comments at the moment. So hey, Linda, this is still all your fault. This is still all your fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah, because I walked into that darn church that one day for one of these for a visioning session, and I opened my mouth about drainage ditches or something, and you said, you'd be really good working on some of the stuff at the township, and look what you've done to me.
I think it should be a long break. It's
Township, thank you very much.
Okay, let's do this, unless somebody objects, let's.
In my opinion, I'm
We done?
against those.
Okay, Ross, we're gonna
I can't say.
adjourn the meeting. We're gonna adjourn the meeting. Unless somebody's got something else urgent we need to do, let's adjourn the meeting.
Can I say aye?
Okay, Brian, anything else from you, buddy? Okay, we can catch up by email or phone. When are you back in town? Okay.
Well, I remember when they had the
All right.
speakers on top of the building.
Yeah, anything.
Remember we moved in there?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, thanks for joining. Take care.
Probably if you talk to that right there,
Okay, bye.
I'm sure you get your copies if they're available, yes.
Don't they submit to the township?
You salute to the township, you salute to him.
They're all the way to the fence.
Sure.
Up to 85.
Will that have water samples or just the boring samples?
I farmed it as part-time.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I caught most of it. If you're looking for whatever the final report is.
We may get a copy as a baseline.
Gotcha.
Do they have like water samples?
That's a fair question. At this point, I am not clear. We're all not clear.
I farmed the better
Not
tools.
exactly what all the various agencies are requiring as far as working through soil samples, water samples, boring samples, things like that. So the challenge for us is going to be, all those agencies weigh in, we've got a collection of information, trying to figure out, do we think we have enough? And we may employ our township engineer to help us evaluate that. We've got a gentleman here that's got quite a bit of expertise in that area. So bottom line is, we'll get a collection of information that obviously will be available to the public as well. And once we get that, we'll try to figure out what we've got.
Okay, and then once it's...
I don't know about that, but I know there's an awful lot of people.
We have that too, we're wondering, so, is some of this information, can we go online rather than bothering you guys?
From a planning commission point of view, not very easily. We've actually asked that question and had several folks ask, about could we put some of this stuff online like the township board does. We've not received a whole lot of interest because there's a bunch of extra work. So, bottom line though, yeah. And I'm not gonna suggest that with subjects like this, that we won't necessarily make an exception to the clerk's office to go ahead and, post something that's relatively obvious on the website and the location and say, hey, here's where the information is. So we'll work on that. But bottom line is we'll make sure that all you folks know that, where we are in the process. So that when this comes up for final review from the planning commission point of view, it's on the agenda, you can come and listen in and we'll go through the entire application of the process. Same thing will happen with the township board.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
I know you're being held up to continue your meeting, but...
No, actually, we decided we better bail.
Okay. Are we meeting on the 22nd?
I haven't personally discussed that. I've heard rumors relative to the times, which are not necessarily true. Topics like this is always a bunch of rumors, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, somebody had suggested this, an article relative to this or something, and we researched that for a couple hours today, and I can't find any evidence of that.
We haven't written about it.
Yeah,
there's been today and I'll be doing that.
Yeah, there's been other, you heard a few of the other comments, there's been other things. Yeah, go ahead. It's just the
If you go by what happens next.
I'm curious if there are
gotta figure out how I can best describe this to you in as simple terms as I can.
Most you're gonna run into some angry bitch on the other end of it.
We have an applicant who is trying to understand how to move forward in the application process. Sounds like gobbledygook, but bottom line is that we need a complete application that attempts to comply with all the requirements that we have set forth, and an application that demonstrates that they comply with all the state and county requirements.
I don't have much for beer.
No, they've got a preliminary application.
Not into long black coats or on that front.
It's been revised. I think the latest application that has the most complete information, let me see what the date is now, is November the 1st.
So it's common, they had a second.
Take care, buddy.
when you have a topic like this, the problem is that as people learn more and more about what they're getting into, just as the gentleman mentioned, shoot, we might want to scale this back. You know, it was like, first it was, how you doing? This is not his list. Now, you know, maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe it's bigger than. And again, it's one of those things that I would simply suggest when you begin to dig into what the requirements are in the state of Michigan, you find out, hey, you've got, you $50,000 application, $1,500 application fee, the township's going to charge any fees the engineering services. Then, you've got all the infrastructure, like we're saying, fences, roads, entranceways, so it's a business. So, a lot of times what happens in cases like this, well, how much is involved, they start to find out, maybe I'm into this a little more than I had originally thought I was going to do. So I think they're working on a discovery.
We pulled all the things out of double wall tanks. And there's a full wall on the inside of the building. I was the one that run the job for the state
regulations for the town. There's requirements for the county and the state level. The Department of Health.
Well, I wired a gas station. Intrinsically, it's all intrinsically safe.
Step one is, they submitted an application. Step two is evaluating where everything, whether everything is actually contained in that application.
You did a good job.
At some point, we have to hold a public hearing, okay? And so what we decided to do at this point was, because we assumed there was going to be some pretty significant interest.